I was a bit surprised to see it. It was armed fortress, not armed zone. Gungpildu's stigma had passed level 10 and entered the next step. You have invaded private property. It was a surprise. This message was welcome in a moment like this. Ack, it hurts! What is this? The Japanese screamed painfully as the hundreds of turrets fired at the same time. One hit wasn't a big blow, but it was disastrous once hundreds of bullets poured out. The damage was even greater because their movements were restrained. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Blood flowed from their bodies as the Japanese were hit by the bullets. Eyes! My eyes! What is this? The shells flew without stopping. The Japanese screamed and sat down as they were hit. Full advance! The army of small people hiding at the entrance of the forest joined in. Originally, it would have been hopeless, but the situation changed due to the current state of the Japanese people. Small blades dug into the holes made by bullets, and the Japanese screamed in succession. Then I heard a dignified voice. Don't invade private property. This is my land. As expected from the armed fortress master, he laid down private property even when coming to this world. The wounded Japanese got up and shouted, Retreat! Let's go back! It was great. Gungpildu's turrets were strong enough to make 3 disasters retreat, despite their small size. I turned around and saw a small fortress rising from the ground. It was hard to call it a proper fortress, but I could see why he was called the Armed Fortress Master. Wah! We won! We defeated the disasters! The jubilant small people gathered around and shouted for victory. There were 2 people standing on top of the fortress. One of them was Gungpildu, the other one... Why is this your land? This isn't a place where private property isn't recognized. A little girl doesn't know what she's talking about. Shouldn't you show more courtesy to this goddess? This voice. The small people shouted again. Goddess Nim! Hooray! Hooray! Goddess? The woman at the top of the fortress discovered me and jumped down. Her short dress blew in the breeze, and the sound of a light landing was heard. She had a distinctive, prideful look. She really hadn't changed. The small people parted in front of her like the waves before Moses. I smiled and opened my mouth. Haven't you become very successful? SOOYUNG approached and raised my chin with her fingers. It's been a while, Kim Dokcha. You are still ugly. I once again met SOOYUNG, the goddess of Peaceland. We headed to the castle, and I asked about the things that had happened to SOOYUNG. I was walking down the street when I was hit by a bus full of survivors. Then, I woke up here. Does that make sense? What about Gungpildu? I fell into Han River and was here when I opened my eyes. I felt disbelief. What is this fantasy novel? Have you forgotten where we are now? This was the conversation. In fact, it seemed absurd, but something similar had happened in Ways of Survival. There were quite a few returnees who traveled to another world after falling into Han River or being hit by a bus. Still, to experience such a thing during a scenario. What the hell were those Dokubi jerks doing? I asked. Then why are you called the goddess? Did you ask them to call you that? SOOYUNG shook her head and grumbled. Tch! Treating me like this for saving you? What? Tell me. Have you forgotten who I am? Has your brain decreased due to your smaller head? Come to think of it, this was a stupid question. SOOYUNG was the only prophet remaining in Souldom. Moreover, 1 day on Earth was 3 days on Peaceland. We had been separated for a week, so the time SOOYUNG spent in Peaceland was around 3 weeks. She knew the future and was given 3 weeks. It wasn't strange for SOOYUNG to become the goddess of another world. No, it was still a bit strange. Why was she a goddess instead of a queen? You 2 know each other very well. I looked back and saw Gungpildu watching us with a disgruntled expression. I hesitated for a moment before opening my mouth. I didn't want to, but there was something I should say. Gungpildu. What? I'm sorry. What are you talking about? Sorry for not taking care of you. Who asked you to take care of me? I'm really sorry. Thank you for saving me. I really was apologetic this time, so I spoke in honorifics. Frankly, I had been too busy in the 5th scenario to care about Gungpildu. This time he saved my life when my life was in danger. It was too embarrassing to call myself a patron of the Defense Master. The constellation Defense Master scoffed at your apology. They seem to suit each other well. You have sponsored the Defense Master 5,000 coins. The constellation Defense Master reluctantly nods. Gongpildu glared at me for a moment before turning away. Then do well next time. It was funny to see a person so full of pride. In any case, I was glad that both of them were alive, even if they had become small people. Wait, they had become a small person? I glanced at the two people for a moment. That reminded me, why had they chosen to stop being disasters? Both of them weren't the type of people who would do this. I am here to say thank you. I looked back and saw that Li Hyunsung and the others were approaching. They had been riding the insects towards Veronica when they countered Gongpildu's group passing by. No need, I just did what I had to do. Han SOOYUNG smiled slightly and waved her hands. I now knew what it was like when a devil wore a mask. Li Jihee watched Han SOOYUNG and opened her mouth. By the way, who are you? That reminded me, this was the first time that people had saw Han SOOYUNG's actual appearance, not her avatar. In other words, the party members had no idea that she was the first apostle. Han SOOYUNG glanced at me, and I answered on her behalf. That... Li Jihee surely wouldn't stay still if she found out that this was the first apostle. Li Jihee was one of the ones who suffered the most damage when the apostles attacked Chungmuro. The party would be turned upside down if Han SOOYUNG's identity was revealed, and a blood feud might occur. Eventually, I decided to close my eyes and betray my conscience. She's just a friend I know. I didn't know if I could use the word friend. Well, it didn't matter. I had no friends anyway. I couldn't see Han SOOYUNG's face. I'm sorry, but can I ask you one thing? The one who broke the awkward atmosphere was Asuka Ren, the Japanese person I had rescued from the cage. Han SOOYUNG looked between me and the Japanese person. Li Jihee was the same. Then who is this Japanese person? Is this person also a friend? It was a somewhat sarcastic tone. Damn brat. Asuka Ren. She is an incarnation from Japan. She isn't a friend, but a trapped prisoner I saved. Why did she need to be saved? She's Japanese. This fight isn't Japan versus South Korea. It is the small people against the disasters. Li Jihee seemed dissatisfied, but she was convinced. Han SOOYUNG whispered to me. What is this? Was this the person in the original novel? You don't know? She probably read up to the 4th regression, but she didn't know Asuka Ren? Oh, was Asuka Ren not active then? Asuka Ren glanced between Han SOOYUNG and I with nervous eyes before opening her mouth. Excuse me, the question? Say it. How did you already get the Peaceland approval? That's right. Certainly, it was natural for Asuka Ren to be curious. Han SOOYUNG wondered, Kim Dokja, what is she saying? She's asking how you became the goddess. That? The others belatedly understood the question, and I stared curiously at Han SOOYUNG. I also wondered what the hell happened. No matter how fast she grew, it was completely different than becoming stronger in 3 weeks and becoming the goddess of a kingdom. I told you, the first place where we fell was in the north. Ajashi and I fell in the middle of attack on Veronica. It was during a raid. Some of the first Japanese group were attacking Veronica. So? One of the Japanese brats looked at us and said something. I was annoyed and killed him. I was speechless for a moment. I roughly knew how things had gone. The Veronica kingdom was going to perish because of the disaster. Then 2 people suddenly fell and killed the disasters. From the viewpoints of the small people, Han SOOYUNG and Gongpildu probably seemed like gods. Well, I wouldn't have killed him if I knew I would become a small person. You didn't read this scenario? I was walking along the street when I was suddenly transported somewhere. How could I know that this was the 6th scenario area? That's why the Japanese saw us and attacked. These 2 people were one of the causes. Because of you, I can see it. Beyond the plains, the castle of this abandoned world could be seen. We looked at the palace. It was a broken palace. The traces of the disaster could be seen from the ruined castle walls. The people were crying in the ruined kingdom. Goddess Nib! The goddess is back! The small people who became nothing in front of an overwhelming disaster. A scruffy-looking crowd came out to greet us. Han SOOYUNG showed a bitter smile. It is already over. Fucking Peaceland. I listened to her words and realized again. I've been lucky until now, but that would end in the next battle. The struggle with the disasters had just begun, and we had to continue fighting a losing battle. I stared at the people who were coming. The people of this world resembled the old Earth. There were no swordmasters, no ninth circle monsters, and even the use of a system was limited. The people of the so-called authentic fantasy couldn't stop the invaders, no matter how hard they tried. And I know whose work this world belonged to. Oscar Wren. The beautiful woman flinched and looked at me. The key to this scenario was this girl. Despite reading Ways of Survival, Oscar Wren knew this world better than I do. Join the South Korean group. We need your help.